Dr. Slemp is part of Deep Griha Board USA, and she is the former commissioner and state health officer for West Virginia and Bureau for Public Health. She is also a member of St. Timothy Episcopal Church, which is one of the 4 churches that support this. It's in Hurricane, West Virginia. Please, at this time, Dr. Slemp.
I really think, as Reverend Tussick said, I think of Deep Griha as an organization that changes lives in many, many ways. And so once experiencing the place, it's really hard not to want to support it. And I think that's the founding story of Deep Griha USA. We began about 17 years ago, and our mission in partnership with all of you, because you all make it possible, is really to both raise awareness about Deep Griha, that's our focus this evening, and then also to support the organization through fundraising and encouraging folks to visit, et cetera. So on your table, on the back of your program, you will find a list of the various activities that are underway at Deep Griha. Kitty made us keep the list to 1 page. So this is just a sum of them, she said. But they really have just grown and expanded, and they adapt to what the community needs are. But I have to say, the work of Deep Griha is about a great deal more than activities and services. So in Marathi, Deep Griha means lighthouse. And you will see that on our video, and on our logo, and the Deep Griha logo. And it really, I think the organization Deep Griha in India really lives up to that word in many, many ways. So it really is not just about services and activities, but it's about building people's capacity to live and learn and work and play and pray and really be meaningfully seen in the world. It is a space where folks can find dignity and confidence and build skills and hope so they can share that light, that potential, that gift of who they are even further. So that is what it's really about in the bigger picture of things. So as you heard earlier, Deep Griha has been fostering this kind of growth and change for the last 49 years. It'll be 50 years next year, which is amazing to me. And they have literally impacted, I'm guessing, hundreds of thousands of lives. People say tens of thousands, but I think it ripple effects. And those impacts are not just in India, they are here as well. I know many of us in this room would say that the organization has really changed us as well. So for this event, I had the great honor and pleasure of doing a Zoom conversation, a video, with Ashlesha, who is the current director of Deep Griha. She's right down here. And she really is a lifelong friend. I have known her for many, many, many years. I won't tell you how many, but it involves bedtime stories. So it's been a long time. And so because of that history, I have to say in the video, we got a little bit carried away. And so I have to thank Randy and Stuart for editing it down to about 10 minutes for you. So thank you. They have saved you a great deal of other things you don't have to need to watch. Now, if you really do want the full feature film, with Spielberg, DreamWorks Productions, etc., I think that'll be posted available online after the event. But we've kind of pared it down to the core components here tonight. So following that video, we're going to have a wonderful presentation by Jason here, and then we will do a Q&A, a chance for you to kind of see what does this conversation spark, what questions do you have, what thoughts does it raise for you, and we'll do that collectively before we wrap up for the evening. So without further ado, I hope that the conversation that we'll share now kind of really gives you a sense of both how solid Deep Griha is today now and how it continues to evoke change and growth for all who are involved. So hope you enjoy. So I'm going to jump right in here. Deep Griha has been around for, 49 years now. It is hard to imagine. And really, it's been a remarkably successful organization. So tell me a little bit about what you think kind of your key ingredient to success has been. What's been the core there that's made such a difference?
I think for Deep Griha, and this is something that keeps coming back to me afresh, especially in the last few years. One of the things what's kept us going through all these years has been the ability to change, keep up with the changing times, not just the environment, but basically listening to the community and adapting our programs, reinventing our programs, redesigning our programs based on what the community needed. And as you can imagine, we've been with the community, some of the communities for over 40, 45 years. And there has been growth in the community as well. And because of this ability to keep on changing and adapting, we've been able to grow with the community and make sure that the new needs or the changing needs are met with the programs or interventions that we take on.
Makes such a difference. And, a lot of your staff comes from that community, right?
Absolutely, more than 50% of our staff comes from the community, and they're, I think, one of our biggest strengths, for sure.
So for those that don't know it, give me the really brief founding story for Deep Griha.
I'm going to try and make sure that the brief part of it stays. So the founding story of Deep Griha, for those who don't know, it started in 1975 with a one-room clinic. Our founding director being a doctor, that was the first step that she could easily take. And everything that we have today is a result of listening to the patients who came in. I think it was quite unusual for a lady doctor in the 70s, for the community to have access to a lady doctor in the 70s. So I think they came up with and spoke a lot more with her, and that information, the input that she was getting, helped her to decide what the next step should be. So for example, the clinic identified malnourishment or malnutrition as an underlying factor for a lot of health issues. And of course, that led slowly but steadily to this nutrition program. So that's just a small example of how Deep Griha has consistently listened to what the community needs and responded with interventions that meet that need or support that need in some way.
Absolutely. So now it's grown from that one-room clinic to this organization that does a host of things. I mean, you all are doing education and youth development and skill building and income generation, women's empowerment and safe housing for children. And there's a host of things. So you referenced at the beginning earlier with change, things like the pandemic. And I've got that had to have thrown a loop into things I just only can imagine. But I think we also know that disruption can be an opportunity to kind of make us look at things differently. So tell me a little bit about what that experience was like for you and what's new that's emerged.
So I think the disruption also led us to refocusing on areas that we hadn't looked at. It helped us to say yes to opportunities that we may or may not have said yes to in pre-pandemic. Because, we had a whole host of programs, but the disruption changed that. We had to sort of relook at some of the programs and step back from some of the interventions that we were undertaking. And then we're in a space to say yes to a new opportunity that came to us. In the last few years, we had an opportunity through a collaboration to work with senior citizens specifically. So sort of, the first time that we were working with that age group, with education being a part of it, and healthcare was an aspect that Deep Griha looked at very deeply. So again, we did work with senior citizens, but not in the focused way that we are now. It's been quite fulfilling to see that this section or this age group that we weren't specifically working with, and the way that program is going and what that interaction is leading to has been quite rewarding.
And so I've been hearing recently about a new project you've got with Cornell Medical School. What's going on with that?
So I think I'm going to step back a little bit to how Deep Griha functioned all these years. Was pretty much put your head down, do the good work, and that was enough. But like I said, the environment is changing. How how we raise funds is changing. So how we, of course, how we document things, how we report things, everything is changing. And you need to have proof. And what better way to have proof than to have a foundation of a research study? I think, like I said before, that the field workers or the community health workers that we work with have been our strength. And the study that we're working on looks at how community health workers conducting home screenings for gestational and postpartum diabetes can change how women look after their health if with early identification or early diagnosis. So it works, it builds on a strength that Deep Griha already has, but also brings in learnings when it comes to uh, which we're going to be using for program design, where it's like, how do you record things? How do you document things? How do you measure something? How do you measure your success? How do you plan your, like, move back, and how do you start with your concept? So there's been a lot of learning, even through the process of working on applying for this project. And we're really looking forward to the learnings that will come with the program. Also, it takes Deep Griha from its current 5 communities that we are working in. We're going to be working in 12 totally. So about 7 new communities.
So, one last question, and this one's a little bit more personal. I really think of Deep Griha as an organization that really transforms lives, whether it's the individuals or the communities or the staff or the volunteers. So tell us a little bit about how being part of Deep Griha over these many years, and now leading it really for several years, has changed you. What's made a difference for you?
So although I've been a part of Deep Griha for way longer, I think the first time I really truly experienced Deep Griha was when I was 19. And I had started, while I was at college, I had started working at Deep Griha. The director thought it might be a good idea for me to use my commerce studies practically in the accounts office. But I think in those initial years, I spent very little time in the accounts office. I was an assistant anyway, so most of my time was spent with field workers out in the community, doing home visits, or in the nutrition center, getting to know the children who came in for special nutrition, or in the creche, just spending time with the children who had come in there, or in the clinic, it was everywhere but the office. And it was an absolutely incredible experience. So somebody who was part of Deep Griha in such a deep way, I saw so many things for the first time as a 19-year-old. Things that, I had been surrounded by these lives, but I had never seen them. Also, I think, and transformation-wise, I was very adamant once I was finished with that stint that I didn't want to work at Deep Griha for many reasons. I felt like there was too much family. But I could do no other job for longer than 8 months. I think that became my thing, because the kind of contentment and the job satisfaction and just the privilege of doing the work that we do at Deep Griha was such a pull that I didn't last anywhere else or in any other jobs for long enough. It's just a different level of commitment. It's a different level of the responsibility. I think I've asked some of our field staff, why would you work? Why did you choose to work at Deep Griha? Because it's the pride that they feel about the work that they're doing for their own community. And I think, of course, you're going to be inspired by people who are choosing to do that every single day.
So, Ashlesha, this has been a joy to have this conversation, really has. And you have shared so well, such great examples, I think, of how it's the fact that in staying true to sort of that why and that how that you do things at Deep Griha, that's made the what that you do so relevant, so effective today. So we so appreciate all that you and the staff do there. And it really is our honor to be a part of that and to invite others to join in.
Let me tell you a bit about our keynote speaker here, and many of you already know him quite well. His name is Jason Barger. He says he is committed to engaging the mind and hearts of people in order to strengthen leadership culture and clarity of mission. He focuses on vision and values. He's been featured in the New York Times, National Geographic Traveler, Kiplinger Letter, global leadership conferences. People know him here as he was former director of First Community Church's Camp Akita. He designed leadership programming for over 1,900 campers every summer. He's led over 1,700 people to construct 125 houses for those in need internationally. He's an author. He's a keynote speaker. He's a leadership consultant. He's an author of books, and they are for sale at the back desk as you leave. Please consider that. So at this time, Jason Barger, please come, share.
Good evening. This is awesome. This place is, I'm a child of this church, so this place has been an important part of my life and has helped shape me. I've had so many experiences here that have been a part of this church that I carry with me in my life, and certainly everything that I'm lucky to get to do in the world today. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being people that are supporting this great mission. And I'm excited to be asked to share some words not only about Deep Griha, but also from my position of helping organizations think about how they're developing in the world today and make some correlations maybe to the way what you just heard about Deep Griha. As you heard, my role now with organizations is helping them think about how do we develop people and how do we proactively shape the culture that we're trying to create, and clarity around mission, vision, and values at a time in the world when things are quite divisive. And so to have organizations where people are, my language, breathing oxygen into people and breathing oxygen into missions and things that make a difference in the world is such a privilege. I had a visit this week from a guild member who dropped off. They wanted to make sure I had this. A document from Deep Griha back from 1980 or 81, the budget and the report about the impact that Deep Griha was having. And so I will be handing this archive off to you. But it was awesome to look at this and think about the impact that this organization now has had for so many lives and so many people, and I know then the impact that it has on the people in this room. I've had a great opportunity in my life to be a part of many experiences, much of which with this church, but also beyond, to serve people in need and to have experience of serving and being a part of different mission work, and all of them have been really meaningful. But as I watched the video and I thought about today, it got me thinking about the word change. And it got me thinking about what is the change that we're trying to lead, and what is the change that we experience, and what is the change then that transforms not only the people that we're trying to serve, but also transforms us. And a quick story came to my mind as I was thinking about one of those trips that now that this church is still leads, where we were building houses in Mexico. And I was lucky to be a part of many, many trips where we were building houses for about 125 families or houses that we built over time. And I remember on one trip being there, and we had pulled the 2x4s out into the dirt, and there I was out in the street, and I was hammering these walls together for this house. And as we were sweating in the sun and we're building this house, all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this man approaching me on the street. And I was busy hammering, and all of a sudden he approached me, and then I heard him say, "Jason, Jason." And I looked up as if, oh, he knows me somehow. And I looked up, and there was a man that's face immediately looked familiar to me, but he was standing there, and he said, "Jason." And then as I'm staring at his face, trying to figure out how we knew each other, I then looked down, and one of his arms, he's missing a hand. And that was the clue to me that I remembered that 3 or 4 years earlier, this was Ricardo that we had built a house for. In fact, Jimmy Long was on that house with me that we were building. And as I stood there, I thought about the fact that when we do these trips and when we do these efforts of service for another person, we don't often get to see what the outcome was. And here was Ricardo standing there, and in his Spanish and my very bad interpretation of what he was trying to say to me, he was summoning me. And all of a sudden, we left the work site that I was on, and he was leading me down the road in Altiplano in this neighborhood of Tijuana, and we walked down this hill, and he took me back to the house that we had built 3 or 4 years earlier. And to watch him with such great pride walking through this house, and his kids now that were a few years older that came running out and came and gave me a hug, and his wife Gloria that came walking out, and they took me through the house that now had been decorated, and they talked about how that house had helped them focus on other things in their life, that they didn't have to worry about that, and it had truly transformed their life. It was oxygen for them in their life. And it got me thinking that we don't often get to experience what that transformation that you heard in that video looks like or feels like, other than what I know is the transformation that took place with me and the opportunity to be a part of serving and helping in that kind of way. We don't often get to see that impact, but what we know, and back in 1980 and 81 as I read through this, the impact on thousands and thousands of lives is real. And what an opportunity and what a privilege it is to get to be a part of change. Now, change doesn't just magically happen, and especially in organizational settings. With the teams and organizations that I'm lucky to serve, we talk about this fact that actually it's a lot easier to just stay the way you are and try to repeat the same patterns of the way you did things yesterday. But the reality is, no organization that actually grows and develops operates that way. It was years ago, Jim Collins, if you know of Jim Collins' work, that he's famous for writing the book Good to Great, but actually he wrote another book that actually I think is an even better book, but called Built to Last, where it studied organizations, some organizations that had basically the exact same market conditions and product and services, about the same organizations, but why did some over a 100-year period last and others fizzled away? And one of the main things they found in their research was that the organizations that were built to last did two things simultaneously. And the image that he would draw was this yin and yang symbol, a yin on one side and a yang on the other side. And the yin of what these organizations did is that they preserved the core. You heard in that video the language around what was the core from the very beginning. These organizations that lasted over time, they preserved the very core of what their mission was, the purpose of why they were compelled to do the work and meet the needs, and they, with great conviction, they understood the core of why they began as an organization, and yet they didn't stay there. The organizations that fizzled off would get so trapped in the core of the way they began or the way they started that they eventually would cease to exist. But the organizations that lasted, the yang of it was they would preserve the core, but at the very same time, they were always stimulating progress. They were always doing what you heard in that video, which was listening to the people they were trying to serve. And the change that they were thinking about for the future, they were open to the fact that maybe we should change some things and we're going to need to adapt the way that we do things. And so change doesn't just magically happen. Change is something that we choose to help be a part of and breathe oxygen in and to lead. And so most people don't sit around and study change theory. I know that. Most people don't. Most humans, we don't sit around and study change theory. But I'm a weirdo guy that thinks about this kind of stuff. And with the organizations that I serve, we often talk about the fact that if you're going to just stay the way that you were and you want to repeat those same patterns, then that's a choice you make. But if you truly want to change and lead into the future, then we probably ought to be smart about the pattern that if you study change theory, all things follow the same pattern, which you heard it layered in that video if you were listening quickly. I refer to the change pattern as the 6 A's because I think it's easier for people to wrap their head around. But the first A is you have to be able to assess. You have to be able to assess where are we being successful and where is it that the opportunities for us to do things different, and we got to be open and willing to change. We have to then be able to align. We have to always be aligning people and bringing more and more people into alignment around what that mission is, and are we connected to what it is we're trying to do together. And then we have to aspire, which means we have to paint a vision of what we want to be different. What is it that we want to be different beyond where we are today? What does it look like to go beyond what we served yesterday? And what are the true needs of the community? And we've got to be able to paint that vision. And then we've got to be able to articulate it. Because if we can't describe it to one another, and we can't tell a story and explain where we're trying to go, then why would we be surprised when it doesn't exist? And then we've got to tie it to action. Change doesn't happen if we don't choose and people don't choose to act. To take that idea and bring it to the needs of the people. And lastly, the way that these organizations stimulate progress is they anchor it. And by anchoring, that means they create habits and policies and procedures and operational standards that continue to anchor that vision that they want for the future. You heard also in the video this reference to the why, the how, and the what that Cathy brought up, right? Did you hear that? Did you catch that in the video? The why, the how, and the what. Well, that language has been made famous by a guy named Simon Sinek, but really the concept is something that's been around for a long, long time, and he's the one that's kind of, in great ways, has brought it to our social consciousness. But it's affectionately referred to as the golden circle, where the inner circle says why, and the next circle out says how, and the next circle out says what. But the golden circle, what it was meant to remind us of is that we as human beings, we often have it backwards. We often get it backwards, we as human beings. In our everyday lives, we oftentimes wake up in the morning and the first thought we have is, what am I going to go do? And in the frenetic pace of our lives and the frenetic pace of our organizations and we just are trying to keep our head above water and do the same stuff we did yesterday, we can get stuck and trapped in that outer part of the circle of the what, which means we don't ever spend enough time in the next circle, which is the how. And if we spend less time in the how, that means we spend even less time in the center of that circle, which is the why. Why are we even doing it? And so the golden circle is meant to remind us that we as human beings, we often have it backwards. We work from the outside of the circle in. And yet what we know is that the organizations and the leaders and the humans that actually operate from the inside out are the ones that actually stimulate progress and lead the change that they wish to see. That they start from the inside of, wait, why are we even doing this in the first place? A real conviction of the mission and the purpose of why we're showing up. a conviction for then how are we going to listen to the community and identify the next needs. And out of that, how are we going to be committed to collaborating with each other and aligning human beings to be a part of this? And then lastly, then what are we going to go do because of it? And what you hear in that video is an organization for 49 years that has operated, whether they've thought about it this way or not, they've operated from the inside of the circle out. From the why to the how to the what. And they've preserved the core of their past. And at the same time, they've stimulated progress. Just yesterday, I had the opportunity to be with 100 or so leaders down in Cincinnati that serve people with developmental disabilities, that every day are leading organizations and programs that serve people with developmental disabilities. And as we were spending time talking about the kind of oxygen needed for people serving in that kind of capacity today, and what does leadership, authentic leadership, truly look like in the world today? And what would it mean for us to create compelling cultures for our organizations? In the midst of that, one of their leaders said this, and I wrote it down because as soon as she said it, I said, I got to remember that. But she said, my individual actions, and this is somebody, again, that serves people with developmental disabilities every single day, said, my individual actions begin to cultivate the culture that other people around me experience. My individual actions begin to cultivate the culture that the other people around me begin to experience. It reminded me then of Plato's quote, what is honored will be cultivated. I've always loved that. What is honored will be cultivated. From the very beginning, 49 years ago, this organization said, we're going to honor listening to the community, identifying the needs, rallying people to come be a part of it and breathe oxygen into this. And we're going to preserve the very core, but we're going to stimulate progress. And the process that we're going to go on to honor that as important to us is going to cultivate some pretty amazing and transformational things for humans in the world. And the reality is, it not only happens in the work, but it happens for the people that are supporting the work. What we choose to honor is cultivated. And we all cultivate a culture with the people around us. The best organizations not only meet the needs of the mission, but they rally wonderful people together to get everybody looking in that direction and preserve the very core of why we came together in the first place, but are always asking that question of what does it mean to stimulate progress beyond where we've been to where it is that we're trying to go. They are people with conviction that show up each day saying, what is honored will be cultivated, and they operate from the inside out. I hope that as you leave here tonight, you know that your support of this mission, that you breathe oxygen into those efforts for the future of where this organization is going. That you are a part of that. And my hope is that not only will the lives that we may see, but we probably won't ever see, that will be transformed, I hope one of them that's transformed is yours. And what is honored will be cultivated. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to just open it up to you all. And what does all of that stimulate in you? Reflections, thoughts? What does it inspire you? What do you feel called to breathe oxygen into? What questions do you have? We'll just have a conversation.
COVID has obviously been a huge, brought about a lot of forced change. What do you guys see not only in Deep Griha, but also in your practice outside of Deep Griha that you can reflect on?
Do you want me to go first?
You go first, and I'll follow up.
Okay. What I would say, since COVID, which, by the way, there was this thing called COVID that happened. I don't know if anyone heard that or not, but the way I describe it within organizations is we had a few years of weirdo world, where all of a sudden which again, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but we came through a global pandemic that nobody knew was coming, or at least we didn't know that we would experience something like that. And massive impact on people's lives, of course, and then certainly upsetting many of the ecosystems within organizations, right? At the same time, we've had enormous political uncertainty, economic uncertainty, we've had wars, we've had, are my kids being schooled at home or online? We've had, let's see here, intense issues of systematic racism and social injustice. We've had years of division and intense things happening in the world. And what that has, the impact that has had throughout our organizations is that some of you have maybe heard the terminology around the Great Resignation, or maybe that terminology. But if you haven't, there was a period of about 18 months to 24 months where 48 million people just quit jobs. They said, peace, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And which has disrupted, you heard that word in the video as well, disrupted organizations and also impacting the way that people are thinking about their association with where they work and what they want to be a part of. Right now in the world, so to answer your question, Pavan, organizations, if they didn't think prior to this that developing their people and the culture of not just what they do as an organization, but how and why they do it, if they didn't think that was primary, they now do. And they now realize that it's not an add-on to their organization. It has to be a part of the DNA of their organization, of why we do what we do and what kind of culture we're trying to create so that we can have humans that want to be a part of that and help us lead the change that we want. We're at a time right now, the last thing I'll say, and I'll turn it to you, is that Gallup, the organization that studies organizations all across industries, they just came out with a stat about a month ago that said of all the people they survey, there's only 23% of employees in the world right now trust the leadership of their organization and the future of where their organization is headed. Only 23%. And only 20% feel like they're actually connected to their organization, to the mission of their organization, the culture of their organization. And yet when they're asked, what is it you want? 90% of them say, I want to be connected and feel like I trust the leadership and the future of where we're going. So that's a quick way of saying organizations have a massive opportunity right now to be countercultural to that, to have a mission that is compelling, to have leadership that people do trust and believe in, and a future that vision is clear of where they're trying to go and how they're cultivating people along the way to get there.
So, Pavan, I think he's nailed it. It really is about connection. And from the health perspective, which is the world I kind of come from, I think through the pandemic, and we have learned many things in that pandemic, but, to me, one of the positive disruptions has been it has raised and opened up the realization of things that have been around for a long time. Whether that be loneliness and isolation, that has had that we all realize the value of that and why we need to connect and to pay attention to that intentionally. We from the health angle, we deal with things with diseases of despair, whether that be substance use or suicide or depression, and really so much of it is about how we connect in community and how we find meaning with each other. And so, I think the awareness of that and the realization of that, and then opening it up into conversation more broadly than in public health circles, is wonderful. And the understanding that we need to all be able to thrive and create organizations and communities where people are raised up fully. I think Deep Griha has experienced that as well. And so in the video, we actually talk a little bit more about some of the elder senior service programs that they've linked into. So this realization is happening there as well. So during the pandemic, they had worked with seniors, but never closely as a focused group. And so what they found during the pandemic was a lot of families lost jobs. And so the seniors were struggling, initially just with food. Some of them were actually going out and seeking food elsewhere and really not finding it. So they started with a feeding program, delivery, during the pandemic. And then the pandemic resolves, and they start to say, well, we're going to cook on Thursday. Do you want to come in? And they loved it. And it wasn't just the food, it was the connection and the people. And that grew, and they said, we really want to do some more activities together because we value that connection. And they would tell stories, and now they do yoga classes, and they kind of dealt with the physical. They helped with what are the government programs that they can tap into and link into, but they really tapped into the spiritual connection in terms of just connection with people and human bond. And so they also do classes on yoga, as I said. They connected across generations. They had a day in which the kids, the seniors, went to the city of Child and interviewed the seniors and did art projects together and connected across generations. So I think that's the piece that, thank goodness, is broken open. We need to be intentional about this. And I think that's where they're living it out there as well. So.
And what the impact that the things that you did here mission-wise had on you. And I know, Cathy, you went to India with Deep Griha. So if you want to expand on that, but also, Cathy, if you might want to talk about how that impacted you, your visit to Deep Griha, and what you experienced there and how it affects what you do now, maybe, too.
I'll give you the quick answer is, for me, putting your faith into action has always been something that resonated with me. And to then begin to have opportunities to do that and to see tangibly that impact that you are hoping to make and be a part of was wonderful. And then to be in an environment where we were thinking up, well, where are those needs and how to help mobilize people to go meet them, was an extension of let's not just talk about the faith that we believe in and or are trying our best to think about, but what does it look like in action and behavior? And so that has been life-giving to me and helped me think about the way that, my whole life has been oriented because of that.
So I was 22 and graduating from a perfectly good university, and I thought about what am I going to do next, and I thought, here I am graduating from this great university and I have no marketable skill. And I thought I wanted to go to medical school. I went ahead and applied, but to be honest, I was kind of burnt out of education, and I thought med school is a long haul. I need to do something else for a year or two. So through a variety of things, I fell into the opportunity to go to India and work with Deep Griha for a year. And so I did, and had no clue what I was stepping into. It was definitely an adventure, but found an organization and even more so, a family and people that I was just inspired by and honored to be a part of. They truly became family. Neela became somewhere between a mother and an aunt or a sister. We were that kind of, this was the young physician. I was about to go to medical school, and so she really became a mentor for me. The work was my introduction to community and community development. And just the fact that, I watched them listen, and I formed relations with people, and I could walk through the slums and step in and go talk to the folks, over tea, and just hear from the community and be a part and be accepted in that world. And so it was a year of thinking about big picture things and doing very tangible things, playing with the kids and doing artwork with the kids, and thinking about faith and poverty, and understanding that, it's more than economic lack. It's about hope, and how people, when they are partnered with, not just served, but partnered with, and seeing possibility and accepted for who they are, can thrive and grow. And so that was my intro there. And so I think I came back home, finished medical school, but I always had this lingering thing: what is this public health thing? What is this broader picture of community? And so that's how I ended up in public health, to be honest, is from that experience. It made me think about systems and about care and about how do we build communities that allow people to grow fully and to be holistically healthy. And Neela I think, remained a mentor and a friend for her whole life to me. And I just so value that experience. So that was the impact it had on me.
The doc.
Thanks very much. This has been great. Generations, the new generations, Gen X, Gen Z, and I'm not even with the different attitudes, different perspectives, beyond the trust issue, all the other issues about how they view organizations in general. I'd be interested in your thoughts about both the challenges and the opportunities in bringing on board the new generations, both for organizations in general and Deep Griha in specific.
Yeah, in 2017, millennials became the largest generation in the US labor force. So organizations that aren't thinking about the way that the workforce is changing aren't being realistic about what some of those differences might be, and oftentimes younger folks get thrown under the bus a little bit and say, oh, they don't want to work, or they don't care, they don't have the same work ethic, or they all of the stereotypes that get thrown out about it. But there's also some really good questions and things that younger folks have been asking. And that connection to and a desire that I don't just want a job, but I actually want to be connected to something, that community, and want to be a part of something bigger than me, is not a bad thing. In fact, I think we all would say that's a great thing. And so, but the problem is, in a lot of older models or organizations, it's harder for them to find that. And they certainly, if you grow up where technology has just been another extension of your body, you do access and move through the world differently. And it's not necessarily, you can judge it however you want, right versus wrong, but it's just it's their experience. And so organizations have opportunities to try to help renegotiate what that work-life relationship looks like. And what the ones that I would say are doing that really well, what it ends up is that they have a deep commitment from young people. And they have people that then feel like they are connected and valued and a part of it. The other thing I just quickly would say is that, because I was just having this conversation with a company the other day, is that they were talking about these young professionals, that they just feel like they're lacking professional skills in some ways, and they were naming really specific things that they said they were lacking. And they said, well, you know what? The first 3 years of their professional career happened to align with COVID. And so they didn't learn the things that you're talking about in the traditional way that you're talking about them. That's not their experience. And so it doesn't mean the person is wrong. But it does mean if that's something, what is honored will be cultivated. Is that something we want to honor? Then it's then more responsibility on us to help coach and develop that with them. But that might be an experience they didn't have.
Yeah, it's hard in all those Zoom meetings to, is today a dress from the waist up day, or is it all dress all the way down day?
Today was a full day, by the way.
Today was a full day, that's right. I had to put not the sweatpants on. And that's the beauty of being in person, but you feel differently when you're doing that. And so I think it is learning a different way to interact and finding, and I think it's not an all virtual or in person. It's how to do both. And how to navigate that. One of the things I do career-wise now is I coach teams around health equity and health and community health initiatives around the country. And I have a team right now that very young, all working together, and they've never met. They're all over the country, but they've never met. And but when you really create space for them to talk about what's important to them, and to reflect on their own leadership and their values and how they kind of work together in new ways, there's a lot of passion there. And they're incredibly bright and they are passionate. And it is really just kind of, I find, a lot of support to kind of create the space for them to explore that together and then to work on an active project to plan. We also happen through that program to be able to bring them together. So for the first time, they're going to meet in 3 weeks through that leadership development program. And so I think it is kind of supporting and coaching and mentoring and giving people space to learn. They do that at Deep Griha as well, I will say. And so there are a lot of programs for young adults or young secondary school students. They partner with tech industry a lot and do tech trainings with 17, 18, 19-year-olds. They link people into internships in businesses. So they've got folks that do internships with the banks, and I think is one of their partners. They have partnered, interestingly, and been able to send some of the young girls to a women's and girls leadership development program in Germany, actually. So the last couple of years, there's been a handful of girls that have gone, traveled to Germany and experienced an international leadership opportunity, and then are asked to come back and share some of that with their colleagues. So I think we all work on it in different ways, but yeah. I have hope.
But the quick bow that I'd put on that question, Doc, is every organization has to own that piece of it. And it's not for somebody else to solve, it's for us to solve. And meaning that leaders and organizations have to be open to new ideas and listen and adapt, or else the market will dictate. And meaning 48 million people said, I'll go do something somewhere else. And many young people will say, I don't need to work here, I'll go somewhere else. And so it truly is in the hands of the organizations to say, what are we cultivating?
To align that effort and to really breathe in that oxygen that's going to help people follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is going to be a quick question or a long question, I don't know, but as I'm sitting here listening to this here, I'm wanting to know, each of you, Cathy, you've been there you've been involved in this for many, many years. You've seen Ashlesha grow up from very little up to today. You've been there also, but you're also working very much in change here in this environment here in the U.S. What are the unique things that we feel Ashlesha is dealing with in a society in India compared to what we would maybe be dealing with here in the U.S.?
I'll let you take the Deep Griha. You are the Deep Griha expert.
I wish she could speak to that directly more. There's a lot of levels of that probably, and I'd actually invite others. We have a Deep Griha global group that meets every couple of months, and so there's several of you all here, and that we connect with Ashlesha regularly at that time, kind of hear what's happening and where she's going. So I would say others, please chime in on this. There have been a lot of changes in terms of the administrative aspects of how nonprofits are funded in the last few years. And so there's been a lot of navigating that administratively, I think. that has been developed. Now that happens here too. It's just very unique to India. What's happening with that currently? I think she probably, like her mother before her, still deals, and like I have dealt with here, and others have dealt with cultural differences around male and female leadership. And I think it's probably even stronger a challenge sometimes there. I think she, as you heard a little bit in the video, has needed to and has now, kind of established her own leadership style in the organization. She grew up in that organization, and she needed to, as she said, she needed to head out and then come back, and kind of be her own leader. And I think she's growing into that now, and doing that well. What else would others? What would you, Ken, Pavan, Randy, from our conversations with her, what would you say are key things that she continues to wrestle with?
Wrestling with is probably an understatement with what she has to deal with over there, in my opinion. And I wanted to prompt that question because you answered it exactly the way I would hoped you would. I'm very impressed. Even though I haven't known Ashlesha as well as some of the rest of you here have, I have had the opportunity to visit with her in Pune for a very short period of time. And I am so impressed with what she has done with just the short time and I'll say limited resources that she has available to her. So from a culture, from an industry standpoint, do you see the same thing, Jason, globally?
Yeah, well, yes, I would say, I think what the point, Cathy, that you both were building off of is that the transition of the leadership and the succession planning from the parents to her is a transition, and for her to find her own voice, and also, again, back to what I spoke about, but what you can see layered in the way that she thinks is, I want to preserve the very core of what I've learned and what the past of this organization has been, but I also am very much realizing we can't be stuck there. And so part of that stimulating progress and thinking and listening and identifying new needs in the community and new needs that are evolving over the last few years of Weirdo World, it sounds like she's thinking that way. The other thing that I would just layer in as things that all organizations are dealing with right now is we have never lived in a more busy, distracted, and cluttered culture than we do right now. And so it's easy to have our focus pulled away. It's easy to lose momentum over why we're even here. It's easy then to drift off, and cultures can then lose the soul of why they're even together. And again, so I'm just reinforcing that intentionality that comes from that ongoing effort of breathing oxygen into that change process is what the places I think that are navigating it most gracefully are doing.
I think the other piece that is very true there, you heard her say 50% of the staff comes from the community. And so they hire lots of folks in the community, lots of folks that are young coming into it, and so they have to work to develop that. And so people don't walk in and just suddenly have great documentation skills and fundraising skills and grant writing skills and technical support systems for your, let's now put out a new website, et cetera. And so there's a messiness in letting people grow and giving them the space, but also the supports and the tools, and navigating that with funders and with the government, and dropping finances if as different organizations come and go and partner. So I think she navigates that as well. But that's really part of their mission, is to develop people. So you have to live in that world of helping it. And you get such another benefit and shine from that as you see it evolve. But it's not always easy when you're having to send the report back to the funding agency. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to us. Thank you for listening to us.